My spoiled sister ruined my life over her divorce. A year later, I discovered what really happened. I'm 29. 7 years ago, my entire world came crashing down when my family kicked me out of our home. I was 22 at the time, fresh out of college, and just started my first job at a local marketing firm. I was living with my parents to save money before getting my own place. The job market was tough, and entry-level salaries weren't exactly designed for independence in our expensive suburban area. My parents had seemed understanding about this arrangement, at least until my sister Hannah turned our lives upside down. Let me paint you a picture of our family dynamic. Hannah's 37 now, making her 15 years older than me. We were never particularly close growing up. The age gap was just too wide to bridge. When she was heading off to college, I was still learning to tie my shoes. And when she got married to Pete at 27, I was just another face at the wedding, barely old enough to drink the champagne at the toast. I later learned that I wasn't exactly planned. My parents had Hannah young, and she was their perfect firstborn, smart, musically talented, and following all the traditional paths they'd hoped for. Then I came along, a surprise that threw a wrench in their carefully laid plans. Don't get me wrong, they took care of me, made sure I had what I needed, but there was always this underlying current of Hannah being the golden child. Every achievement of mine was measured against hers, every decision compared to what she would have done. Their marriage seemed perfect from the outside. Pete was this really successful dietitian, totally devoted to Hannah. He had his own practice, was well respected in the community, and seemed to worship the ground Hannah walked on. I remember at their wedding, his vows made everyone cry. He talked about how she was his soulmate, how he'd spend every day trying to deserve her love. They had 3 solid years together before everything imploded. It was a Tuesday evening when Hannah came home in tears, mascara running down her face as she burst into our parents' house. She dropped a bombshell that would shatter our family. She was filing for divorce because Pete had supposedly been cheating on her for 6 months. The way she told it between sobs, she discovered inappropriate texts and emails, evidence of secret meetings, all the classic signs of infidelity. Here's where I got dragged into the mess. The woman Hannah accused Pete of cheating with? That was Emily, a friend of mine from college who'd gone to Pete for professional help with gaining weight. She'd always been naturally thin and wanted to build muscle mass for her amateur boxing career. I'd made the introduction, never imagining it would come back to bite me like this. The whole thing felt off from the start. Emily wasn't the type to go after married men. She'd been with her boyfriend since freshman year. And Pete? The guy practically wore his love for Hannah like a badge of honor. But my parents? They didn't even question it. Hannah was their golden child, their firstborn, and her word was gospel. What really knocked me sideways wasn't just them believing her. It was how quickly they turned on me. Hannah convinced them that I was somehow responsible for ruining her marriage just because I'd introduced Emily to Pete. She spun this wild tale about how I must have known what was going on, must have helped cover it up, because why else would I introduce them? Next thing I knew, I was standing on the sidewalk with my belongings stuffed into 2 suitcases and a garbage bag, my own parents threatening to call the cops if I didn't leave. They didn't even give me time to pack properly. Just threw my stuff together and pushed me out. The look in my mom's eyes was what hurt the most, like I was a stranger, someone she'd never loved at all. Their 22-year-old son, sobbing on the street with nowhere to go, watching the porch light go out as they closed the door on me forever. Thank God for good friends. My college roommate, Mark, took me in until I could get back on my feet. I tried everything to reach out to my family. Called until my phone died, sent texts begging for explanations, even showed up at their door a week later, but got nothing except threats and cold shoulders. I did some digging, trying to make sense of it all. Emily was bewildered when I told her what Hannah had claimed. She showed me pictures of her and her longtime boyfriend, now fiancé, proving she'd been in a committed relationship the whole time. She was horrified that anyone would think she'd break up a marriage, especially since she'd only seen Pete 4 times for professional consultations, always during business hours at his office. Pete had vanished, blocked my number, move his practice to a new location, completely disappeared from social media. Hannah and my parents? They might as well have been on another planet. I later found out they'd changed their phone numbers, probably to make sure I couldn't contact them anymore. So I did what any young person has to do when life pulls the rug out from under them. I picked myself up and focused on survival. Found a tiny studio apartment in a not great part of town. Threw myself into work, tried to build something resembling a life. Fast forward to last week. I'm 29 now, engaged to an amazing woman named Liza, living in a nice apartment, finally feeling like I've got my life together. I'd worked my way up at the marketing firm, made some smart investments, and even started doing freelance work on the side. Liza and I met at a charity event 2 years ago. She's a doctor, brilliant, and kind, everything I could have hoped for. We posted about our engagement on Facebook. You know, the usual couple stuff. That's when the truth finally came knocking. Out of nowhere, I get this anonymous email. Turns out, Liza knew Pete from some medical conference. She's a pediatrician, and he'd seen our engagement announcement. The email contained a real story of what happened 7 years ago, complete with proof that turned everything I thought I knew upside down. The truth? Hannah was the cheater, not Pete. And get this, she'd been having an affair with another friend of mine, Frank, who worked as a cashier at her local grocery store. When Pete caught them, Hannah did what she does best. She lied. Told Pete I was in on it, that I'd introduced him knowing what would happen. She spun this whole story about how I'd encouraged them because Frank was an aspiring singer and Hannah could help with his career. She did have a good voice and had done some local theater. Pete sent me screenshots of emails between Hannah and Frank, love notes where they bragged about fooling everyone. The evidence was bulletproof. Dates, times, places they'd met, even plans they'd made for after Pete found out. They'd been planning to move in together, start fresh, but something had gone wrong with their perfect plan. After confirming it was Pete who sent the email through some careful social media detective work, we met up at a coffee shop downtown. He looked older, grayer, but still had that same honest face I remembered. He apologized for blocking me, explained that he'd been so hurt and angry when Hannah accused me of facilitating their affair that he couldn't bear to face anyone from that time in his life. But seeing my engagement announcement had stirred something in him, a need to finally set things right. 2 days ago, we showed up at my parents' house unannounced. They still live in the same place. I checked with old neighbors to make sure. Hannah was living there too, which didn't surprise me. She'd always been the type to take the easy route, and living with mom and dad meant free rent and home-cooked meals. Hannah's face when she saw us? Priceless. All the color drained from her cheeks, and she actually stumbled backward into the hall table. She knew her house of cards was about to come crashing down. My mother tried to shut the door in our faces, but Pete put his foot in the way. All those years of anger gave him courage I'd never seen before. We laid it all out in their living room. The affair with Frank, the elaborate lies she'd spun to cover it up, even how she'd had to sell our grandmother's diamond ring to Pete in the divorce settlement because she couldn't afford to pay him otherwise. That last bit hit my mother especially hard. That ring was supposed to stay in the family, passed down through generations. My parents were horrified. For once, Hannah couldn't talk her way out of it. The emails were damning, and Pete's quiet, detailed account of discovering their affair left no room for doubt. My father, who'd always treated Hannah like she could do no wrong, looked like he'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. He packed her bags right then and there and kicked her out. Poetic justice considering what they'd done to me 7 years earlier. But the drama wasn't over. Hannah tracked down my address and showed up at my door the next day, crying about how I'd ruined her life. When I wouldn't let her in, she scrawled "monster" on my door in marker. Real mature for a high school teacher in her late 30s. I had to explain that to my neighbors, which was fun. My parents are trying to weasel their way back into my life now, talking about attending my wedding like the past 7 years never happened. No apology, just expectations that I'll welcome them back with open arms. They sent this long text about how families should stick together and how everyone makes mistakes. Funny how that philosophy didn't apply when they were throwing me out on the street. Hannah keeps calling from different numbers, playing the victim, crying about how she can't afford to live on her teacher's salary without our parents' support. She's left sobbing voicemails about how I've destroyed her life, how she'll never forgive me for exposing her lies. The irony of her talking about forgiveness isn't lost on me. You know what's really funny? They're calling me harsh for pressing harassment charges against Hannah when she wouldn't leave me alone. These are the same people who threw their 22-year-old son out on the street without a second thought. The same people who changed their phone numbers to avoid hearing my side of the story. The irony would be hilarious if it wasn't so sad. Their latest message? They've taken Hannah back in and want me and Liza to come over for dinner to sort out our differences before the wedding. They're still living in their own little world where they think they can fix this with a family dinner and some small talk over mom's lasagna. As if 7 years of abandonment can be erased with a home-cooked meal. I don't need their forgiveness, their presence at my wedding, or their twisted version of family. 7 years ago, they showed me I was better off without them. And that's one lesson I won't forget. The family I've built for myself, Liza, my close friends, even my reconnection with Pete means more to me than their conditional love ever did. I've got Liza now, and she's all the family I need. She understands what it's like to rebuild yourself. She had to do the same thing after losing her parents in a car accident during her residency. We're planning our wedding for next spring, and honestly, not having to worry about family drama is making the whole process much more enjoyable. Some people never change. They'll always be stuck in their patterns of selfishness and denial. My parents will probably always favor Hannah, always make excuses for her behavior. And Hannah? She'll probably never admit how much damage she caused with her lies. So the next time they try to contact me, they'll be talking to my lawyer instead. Sometimes the family you choose is better than the one you're born into. I lost a toxic family, but gained something much more valuable: self-respect, peace of mind, and a chance at real happiness with someone who actually cares about me. Liza and I are talking about starting our own family someday, and you can bet we'll do things differently. No favorites, no lies, no conditional love. As for Hannah, she can keep playing the victim with our parents. I'm done being the family scapegoat. The truth finally came out, and karma? Well, karma did its job perfectly. Sometimes the best revenge isn't something you do, it's just letting the truth speak for itself. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you have any thoughts, I'd love to hear them, so please leave a comment. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want more stories like this one.